Welcome to the first ever box office breakdown YouTube version here for Everything Box Office. My name's Noah and I'll be bringing you through all the latest box office news in the UK, North America and worldwide. This week we can see the continuing struggles for Fantastic Beasts. There's a pretty good entry for The Bad Guys and a bit of conversation about original films and their place in the box office. But first is the UK top 5. A pretty slow week here in the UK this week. It's kind of kids head back to school, no new films in the top 5. It was a good week for Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which jumps back into number 1 after being number 2 last week to Fantastic Beasts. Not so great news for The Secrets of Dumbledore though, which dropped 40% in its third weekend, continuing a pretty disappointing run and pretty much enshrining the fact that it will finish quite well below its predecessors, The Crowns of Grindelwald and the original Fantastic Beasts, which were already finishing lower than each other anyway. And it almost definitely now will become the lowest grossing Wizard of Wood film at the UK box office. The current lowest is Crowns of Grindelwald, which ended up about £34 million. All the other Harry Potters, but Prisoner of Azkaban, are actually some of the top grossing films in the UK ever. So a pretty disappointing one there. You can find on our site a bit more of a deep dive into exactly what's happened. In third place we've got The Lost City, the Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum adventure comedy. Managed to retain its place in third after dropping only 21% on last week. That brings its total box office in the UK here up to 5.6 million. Pretty healthy sum there for the Paramount comedy, which has shown pretty good staying power so far actually. One step below that we've got Operation Mincemeat, which was on the chart last week, actually moved up a spot to 4th, dropped only 21% on last weekend. Pretty good sign. It must have some pretty good word of mouth and pretty sustained interest there, especially for a drama like that. That should be a pretty nice one for Warner Brothers. And then finally in 5th place and back on the chart after being off there last week is The Bad Guys, with a taking of just under 740,000. And just off the top 5 as well, The Northman, which wasn't the top 5 this week, actually does only drop 29%, bringing its total to £2.4 million, and that is actually, despite not being in the top 5 this week, a career best for Robert Eggers. His previous one was 2020's The Lighthouse, starring Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, which had a total of 1.4 million, so way past that already. Pretty good success for him. And also, the highest new title this week that didn't make it onto the top 5 was The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, the Nicolas Cage parody comedy. That opens to around about 470,000. Not too bad, quite a niche film. Hopefully we'll be making a good thing elsewhere. Moving on to the UK home entertainment charts. These charts come from the official chart company. It's based on DVD, Blu-ray and download sales across a 7-day period. So this week, it's after quite a few weeks on the top, Spider-Man No Way Home finally drops down 2 seconds, replaced by Sing 2 in its 2nd week on the chart. The only new entry in the top 10 this week is Jackass Forever in 3rd. Pretty good entry for that one. That's kind of the sort of film you would expect to see doing quite well at home. Death on the Nile remains in 4th. That's available on Disney+, so it's doing quite well to still be making the DVD sales. Belfast in June, little switcheroo there. Belfast moves up to 5th place. Not too surprising, the sort of people buying home entertainment now are kind of the audience looking for a film like Belfast. June drops down, nothing to be worried about, it's been on the chart for 14 weeks now. The Matrix Resurrections stays in 7th. Scream 2, after being 2nd last week, drops quite far to 8th. But nothing to shout about. And Paw Patrol the movie, despite being in its 25th week of release now, moves up the chart from 10th from last week into 9th, giving space for No Time to Die, another chart, an entertainment chart, a long-term resident there. Now, the North American top 5, or domestic market as it's known in many box office analysis. And unfortunately, it's more bad news for Warner Brothers. The disappointing total from Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore is the story of the week here again. Dropped a pretty big 66.8% on its opening weekend, dropping from 1st to 3rd behind Sonic the Hedgehog 2 again as in the UK. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in its 4th week of release, so not a great look there for Fantastic Beasts. yeah, not the sort of, some people were saying maybe last week it could hang around, make its money that way. It certainly does not seem that'll be the case. On the other hand, it was a pretty good weekend for The Bad Guys, which comes through DreamWorks Animation, which did manage to claim a #1 debut. Wasn't a certainty. Finally opens in North America. It's been making its way around the international markets for a while. That's kind of continuing to show the power of the family films that we've seen throughout kind of the beginning of the pandemic. They do seem to be the films that are able to bring people out to the cinema. We had Croods 2 at the very beginning. Sonic here is doing very well as well. And then kind of the bottom end of the top 5. There are 3 new films in the top 5 this week. However, the success of them all has kind of sparked some discussion. So you've got The Northman, which is budgeted around $80 million, debuting at number 4 with a $12.3 million opening. Probably not the strongest that they would have been wanting there. Nothing to cry about, but you know, probably not the best. A lot of people kind of pointing out, oh, this is why you can't give an $80 million budget to these smaller films, but this is the sort of one that you could be seeing around again in awards season. It's got pretty good buzz, got a decent cast, so nothing too shabby for Robert Eggers, but probably not the big push that maybe the studio was hoping for. And then the other end, you've got The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, as mentioned before, the Nicolas Cage film, which has a $7.1 million debut, which is, again, not the strongest, but that's only a $30 million budgeted film, so probably not the end of the world for them. It could easily make that up, especially with the worldwide takings. And speaking of the worldwide, is the worldwide top 5 for this weekend, and despite remaining in the top spot, Fantastic Beasts did drop about 55%, which isn't awful for a film of about this size, but again, as before, it does kind of ensure that this film is not going to be hanging around for a long time, making its money that way, as we've seen with other films in the past, especially with Doctor Strange on his way in about 2 weeks' time, probably going to soak up all of the box office for a film like Fantastic Beasts. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 stays around the 2nd spot. That's nearing a $300 million total, which is pretty healthy for them. And the 3rd spot, you've got The Bad Guys, mainly driven this week by its North American takings, with $29 million, 24 of which coming from North America. The Lost City sits relatively comfortable in 4th. That's just crossed the $100 million mark, so not too bad for them. And then lastly, KGF Chapter 2, the Indian film, remains in the top 5, though it does drop about 70% on last week, although these figures, we should say, are not always reliable due to the Indian kind of unstable nature of some of the numbers coming out of the Indian box office. Looking ahead to next week, there's not an awful lot going on. We're kind of waiting for that Doctor Strange, as I said. However, there is a new Liam Neeson film, Memory, although its impact on the box office is not going to be exactly huge, I would imagine. And then there is a film coming from India called Runway 34, which could make an appearance on this worldwide chart. And now to finish, we always like to take a look at the worldwide top 10 for the year so far. Another pretty stable week this week, as it was last week. Batman remains on the top, quite comfortably. Battle at Lake Changjin 2 sits in 2nd, again quite comfortably. Too Cool to Kill, another Chinese film. 3rd, Uncharted in 4th. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, after moving up to 5th last week, stays there. It won't go any higher at this point. Over $100 million to make up on Uncharted, that's just not going to happen. Although, if you told people a while ago that 4 and 5 on the worldwide top 10 so far would be 2 video game movies, I'm sure many of them would have been quite surprised. And then in 6th, you've got Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. That has actually continued moving up the chart and will probably surpass Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which seems impressive, but they do have quite different budgets. Fantastic Beasts, quite a bit more expensive than Sonic 2 there, budgeted around $200 million, Sonic is I think about 80. Then that kind of pushes Nice For You, another Chinese film, down 1 spot. Morbius actually also continues moving up the chart, believe it or not. Again, unlikely to move any further up though. It's about $50 million between it and Nice For You, that's not going to happen. Boonie Bears Back to Earth, another Chinese film, moves down 1. And then RRR, whatever you want to call it, an Indian film, that stays in 10th. Next week, as I said, this will probably not change much, I would imagine. However, the week after, we'll be looking at the debut for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. It could do 150, make it onto the chart straight away, wouldn't be too surprised by that, but it remains to be seen. But that's all for the box office breakdown this week. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week. It'll be a not too exciting week, but we'll keep it interesting here. And yeah, goodbye.